Hi, I'm Victoria. Welcome to my channel. I'm a little bit late to the game, but I am so excited for this video today. I've been seeing a whole bunch of 25 books I want to read in 2025, and I've seen this in past years too. Never tried it myself, but this year the excitement got to me and I am throwing myself in. And none of the books that I'm talking about today are coming out in 2025, so they're like all, I guess, backlist books. So I split these books up into like 5 different categories, but they're not all even in what amount are in each of them. And then at the end of the video, I have a couple things that I just want to get y'all's opinion about regarding, I guess, future content on my channel. But starting off, this first category is one that I am both really excited but also kind of nervous about, and that is classics. I have read some classics here and there, mainly just as like school stuff back in high school. And then when I was really little, I don't know, do y'all remember the Great Illustrated Classics? I loved those. But as an adult, I haven't really read any. I think I read most of 1984 a long time ago. But yeah, so I recently impulse bought the Cranford edition of Pride and Prejudice at Books A Million. It just caught my eye and I decided to give it a shot, even though I don't normally read those books. So that kind of jump-started this interest, I guess. And I've picked up a couple of Jane Austen books and have been enjoying the experience of trying these different things out. But for this list, the first book that I want to try is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I don't really know much about this one, but Murphy Napier has talked about Daphne du Maurier a lot. I think she has a different one that's her favorite, but this is, from my understanding, like the most well-known. I know it's like a thriller, and the main character is like a lady's maid, and then she gets proposed to by this nobleman, I guess, like this rich dude. And when she goes to live at his estate, there's like stuff going on regarding his late wife. I don't really know what happens in regards to that, but sounds interesting. And I don't have a lot of experience with like Gothic literature either, and I think that that's something I could really enjoy, so I'm excited to try that out too. Next we have Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This is one of the last ones I think that I have to try out. I believe this and Mansfield Park are the only two I haven't. From my understanding, this one, while it does have romance, does also focus more on like the sisterly bond. I could be wrong about that, but I really like what I've seen of Jane Austen's character work, but some of her stuff does get a little too slow for me and have like too many scenes that feel like they don't really serve too much of a purpose besides vibes, and it just depends on the book of if it's going to be like that for me. It's been hit or miss in my experience so far, but I'm excited to see where this one falls. Number 3, we have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Wuthering Heights looks really sad. It definitely seems like it's going to be a different vibe from Jane Austen. She kind of has what you expect to like have a happy ending, like even just reading the synopsis, whereas like reading about Wuthering Heights, it just feels like I'm probably gonna cry reading this. I'll just read this like last little bit of the description. It says, "And how Catherine, forced to choose between passionate tortured Heathcliff and gentle well-bred Edgar Linton, surrendered to the expectations of her class. As Heathcliff's bitterness and vengeance at his betrayal is visited upon the next generation, their innocent heirs must struggle to escape the legacy of the past." It sounds like it's going to be really, really emotional. Anyways, number 4 is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and I have tried picking this up before and ended up DNFing it, but I don't think I really gave it much of a shot because I was in a specific type of mood and it wasn't fitting that. But now that I'm trying to just be on this classics journey, maybe I can be a little bit more open-minded. And I know this is a really beloved series. I'm really hoping I end up liking it. I feel like you probably know what it's about, but if not, and you haven't seen the movie or whatever, it follows, I think, 4, right, sisters, and just their lives. And I feel like the general premise of the story is just that there's no one right way to reach for happiness, I guess. Like there's no one direct path that you have to follow in order to be happy. That was just my understanding of like watching the movies. So maybe it'll be different in the book. And then the last classic that I'm interested in reading is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. From reading the description of this book, I don't really know too much of what it's going to be about, aside from that the main character, Jane, ends up becoming a governess to Mr. Rochester, if I understood that right. But I don't really know what kind of direction the story is going to go in. So that one's kind of going to be a bit of a blind read, I guess, for me. So that's the end of the classics category. Next, we just have general standalones. I guess those could have been a part of this as well. I just kind of wanted to separate the classics a bit. But first in this category, we have Roadside Picnic by Arkady Strugatsky. My husband actually recommended this to me. It's a sci-fi story that sounded really interesting. The way he described it to me was that one day aliens came to Earth and they basically were just treating it like a pit stop and just left their trash, I guess, around, and then dipped when they were done with their adventure or whatever they were doing. And then Earth is just left in shock, like realizing that they're not alone. And then also the aliens just left their stuff that they didn't care about, which to them is nothing, but to the humans is like crazy technology that's way beyond what they're capable of. And so then I guess now there's like people who are sort of like rebels who go and scavenge in there. I don't know fully what's going to go on plot-wise, but just that basic premise sounds really cool to me. Next up is Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and I'll just read this. It says, humanity is a dying breed, utterly reliant on artificial labor and service. When a domesticated robot gets a nasty little idea downloaded into their core programming, they murder their owner. The robot then discovers they can also do something else they never did before, run away. After fleeing the household, they enter a wider world that they never knew existed, where the age-old hierarchy of humans at the top is disintegrating, and a robot ecosystem devoted to human well-being is finding a new purpose. And I believe this one is supposed to be like really humorous, which just hearing that, like I definitely see potential for that to be the case, you know? I don't have a ton of experience with sci-fi right now, but that is something I'm working to change. So I'm really optimistic for this one. Next we have Moonheart by Charles DeLint. This is an author that I was told about by an employee at one of the used bookstores I go to. Otherwise I never would have known about them or thought to look into them. But I had tried out one book from them last year, maybe the year before, I think, and that one wasn't for me, but I've heard really good things about this one, and I think it's the start of a series of books. So I'm really excited because I've heard that this is like magical realism, urban fantasy, and very just like magical feeling. It seems like our two main characters, Sarah and Jamie, they discover some magical artifacts, and there's also some like portal fantasy stuff going on involving like this house and like a magical land, but I don't know anything about like what's actually going to be happening, but all of those elements together does sound intriguing. So yeah, guess we'll see. So my last standalone that I hope to read in 2025 is The Dance Tree by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. And what's interesting about this one is I learned that this is like based on something that sort of really happened in the past. Just that fact alone makes me want to check it out. But it says, Strasbourg, 1518. In the midst of a blistering hot summer, a lone woman begins to dance in the city square. She dances for days without pause or rest, and when hundreds of other women join her, the men running the city declare a state of emergency and hire musicians to play the devil out of the mob. And then, as the city buckles under the beat of 1,000 feet, Lisbeth becomes caught in a dangerous web of deceit and clandestine passion. Like the women of Strasbourg, she too is dancing a dangerous tune. That just, first of all, the writing in just the description sounds really pretty to me. So I have already kind of set my expectations of the writing style in the book up kind of high, but that sounds really, really cool to me. I'm picturing something kind of like the Winter Night trilogy with like that mythology, beautiful writing type feel mixed with Slewfoot with like that old small village, superstition, kind of thrilleriness. That's kind of like the mixture that I'm getting. I could be way off base, but next I'm going to be talking about the series that I want to start this year. I already have a ton of open series, so this is probably just a bad idea to begin with, but I can't help myself. There's so many I want to get to. The first one that I'm going to be talking about is Guards Guards by Terry Pratchett. That is the Discworld series. I've tried looking this up of which book you should start with when wanting to get into Discworld, and I've seen a variety of answers, and that makes it so hard to decide. I know Guards Guards is a really loved one, and I think it's a decent one to start with, so I think that's probably the one I'm gonna go with. If you have read Discworld and you have one that you're like, no, you 100% need to start with this book, let me know. I don't know. I'm floundering, okay? I don't even really know how to describe what this is about. The description doesn't really tell you much, and then my understanding of the series as a whole is it's just like chaos incarnate. So, yeah. Next we have Inheritance by Nora Roberts. This is the first book in the Lost Bride trilogy. I, at first, was not sure that I was going to pick up this series, but then I read, my mind's blanking on the name, that other fantasy series by her, the one that I was talking about, like the Irish Fae, and there's like dragons and stuff. I really liked that series a lot. I thought it was going to be like a new favorite romantasy. The Fae in it kind of were a little too long-winded when they started getting all passionate about nature and stuff, and it made sense. World building, like character, like that was like their thing, so it made sense and fit with the story and stuff. But after a certain amount of speeches, it became a little too much for me, and I was like, all right. So I did not finish that series, but I loved all the other aspects of it so much that I wanted to try another fantasy series by Nora Roberts, and that's where this comes in. So our main character is a graphic designer named Sonia, and an uncle that she didn't know about ends up passing away, and she inherits everything from him, including this like old Victorian mansion that one of the rules in order for her to inherit is that she has to go and live there for 3 years. Turns out the house is haunted, and there she ends up seeing a painting of this woman who her new lawyer describes to her as the first lost bride. Ghost stories can really go one of two ways for me, so I'm not 100% sure that I'm gonna love this series, but I am open to it. I'm really hoping that the strengths that I saw in that other series I read by her carry over, and I see them in this, because like Nora Roberts, she's like the biggest, well, I don't know about nowadays, but one of the biggest romance authors, you know? Next we have the Rivers of London series by Ben Aaronovitch. This is an urban fantasy that I saw recommended in a bunch of places when I was first dipping my toes into urban fantasy, and I was a little nervous about it, but I want to give it a shot because I've seen it like talked about so much, you know? Our main character's name is Peter Grant, and he is a probationary constable. Basically, he's trying to be a detective, I think, and he ends up helping out with a case by getting some leading information from a ghost. It turns out he can talk to the dead, and after this, he kind of catches the eye of what is basically the supernatural crimes unit and gets involved in this whole new world that he had no idea about. I'm nervous about this one because since it is crime-centered urban fantasy, I'm worried about it being very episodic, like bad guy of the week. That is not my thing, so I'm not sure how far I'll make it into this series, but I'm gonna give it a shot. The next series I want to pick up is the Book of the Ancestor series by Mark Lawrence. The first book is Red Sister. I had picked up this book before, read just like a small amount, I think less than a quarter, honestly, and I really enjoyed what I read. Life just got in the way and I didn't end up picking it back up, but I really want to continue from the bit that I read of that, and also reading the first book in the Prince of Thorns series. My throat just made the strangest noise, but Mark Lawrence has he's a really strong writer from what I've seen. So I definitely see myself liking this series. Our main character Nona is a child, and she is about to be hung for, she's being accused of murder, and she ends up being saved by, she a nun, I guess, and taken to this convent called the Convent of Sweet Mercy, which I'm just now realizing how fitting of a name that is. But the girls at this convent are trained to be killers. So that in and of itself, it sounds really interesting to me. Definitely leads the way for it to be very action-packed, but my understanding is that it's also very politically charged, and so I'm really excited for the story. Next, I want to read Dreamer's Pool by Juliette Marillier. This is the first book in the Blackthorn and Grimm series. I have read a few books by Juliette Marillier, and she has an amazing writing style. It's so beautiful, and she does a lot with like folklore and stuff. I love her stuff, but sometimes something about her writing style can be a little bit intimidating for me, so I haven't picked up as much of her works as I'd like to, and so that's why this year I'm hoping to change that. I don't think it's her most loved series, but I started off with Daughter of the Forest. I haven't continued into that series yet, even though I want to, but after reading that book, I found out that people actually recommend that that isn't what you start with of her works, because for a lot of people that's like their favorite, and so they recommend starting with something else and working towards that. That way you don't have kind of like a letdown. And it's been years since I've read Daughter of the Forest, and I do want to do a reread, so I guess I'm trying to act like I'm starting over and just pick up some more of her stuff before going to that series again. Okay, so I was having a bit of technical difficulties, hence the new day, new outfit. Hopefully everything will work now, but let's just get back into it. The next series I want to start is the Shadow Age series by Kim Harrison. This is a new series. She only has one book out in it so far, and that is Three Kinds of Lucky. We're following this girl named Petra Grady who is not able to do typical magic, but she does have a unique ability to handle something called dross, which is like basically magical waste that occurs when spell work from like the normal magic is done. So she has a job that's called like a sweeper, and basically she is like the cleanup crew to make sure that this dross doesn't get out of hand. But then a guy named Benedict is doing a research project that involves studying dross, and so she kind of gets forced into helping him on this project. But he does not really understand dross and how it works and like the dangers associated with it. And so there ends up being an accident while working on this project. And then the two of them end up having to go on the run and also go to seek help from the only person who they think might have an answer. And that is an outcast who was exiled because they used dross to perform magic. So now Petra must decide, it says, whether to stick with the magical status quo or embrace her own hidden talents and risk shattering their entire world. So likely it sounds like she's going to be beginning to learn like a new, possibly dangerous way of casting spells, which sounds like it has potential. I feel like just based off the synopsis of this first book that this series is not going to be set up in an episodic way that I sometimes have issues with urban fantasy. So I'm hopeful that as long as I enjoy this first book, then I'll have a solid series of like connecting plots and stuff through the books that I'll be able to enjoy. Next we have the Nine Kingdoms series by Lynn Curlin. I have the first 3 books on my bookshelves of this series. I had picked up the first one a little bit, but didn't get very far into it, but that's just because I was doing other stuff. I distinctly remember thinking that the writing style that this author has was really funny, so I've been wanting to actually pick this up ever since then. I just haven't gotten around to it, but it's an adult fantasy romance from my understanding. It says, darkness covers the north since the Black Mage has begun his assault on the kingdom of Narosh. Legend has it that only the 2 magical swords held by Narosh's king can defeat the mage. Now the fate of the 9 kingdoms rests in the hands of a woman destined to wield one of those blades. In this land of dragons and mages, warrior maids, and magical swords, nothing is as it seems, and Morgan will find that the magic in her blood brings her trouble she cannot face with a sword and a love more powerful than she has ever imagined. So I am reading this book because of the writing style, but I distinctly remember having some issues with what seemed to be the main guy's personality. I'm hoping that means that he's gonna go through a lot of character growth if he is the love interest, but I guess I'll just have to see. The last new series that I want to pick up is the Age of Blood series by K.M. Enright. The first book in this series is The Mistress of Lies. I believe that's the only one that's out right now. I've seen this at like Barnes & Noble and stuff, and at first the cover really stuck out to me. It's a gorgeous cover, but also it sounded interesting to me, so that's been one that I had my eye on. It seems like our main character is a woman named Shan LeClaire, and she can perform blood magic, and she's also been doing what she can to put herself into a position of power, and then she kills her father and takes his position as like the head of the family. And then a guy named Samuel who has a gift, it doesn't specify what, but he stumbles upon the first victim of a serial killer and gets involved in kind of like murder mystery aspect. And then it says, tasked by the Eternal King to discover the identity of the killer cutting a bloody swath through the city, Samuel, Shan, and mysterious blood worker Isaac find themselves growing ever closer to each other. But Shan's plans are treacherous, and as she lures Samuel into her complicated web of desire, treason, and vengeance, he must decide if the good of their nation is worth the cost of his soul. To me, reading that sounds like it's going to be kind of like a painful love story. I'm hoping that it's like that. I love really emotional romances that like aren't just all good, you know? And it also says that there's vampires in this story, but it doesn't specify aside from a king who all is vampires in this story. So I don't know if the chick we're following is, or Samuel, or whoever. So I guess that'll just be a mystery for now. But I think that this could be like a perfect book for me just because it sounds like a tough romance and a lot of like political scheming. So I'm really excited for this one. Our next category is series that I want to continue. So I've already read at least one book in the series. I have a lot of open series right now that I really just want to work on in general, but I just have a few in here that I really am excited to prioritize, I guess. And the first one is the Spellslinger series by Sebastien de Castell. I have read the first two books in this series and it's been a lot of fun. I have had some small issues with like the main boy's personality, but it's nothing major, and I definitely see him growing and stuff, so I'm looking past that. And the world building in this is so fascinating to me, and the characters are also like alive, like they're like vibrant, they have such distinct personalities and stuff. I am really enjoying just like getting to know everyone in this series. So our main boy Kellen, when he turns 16, there'll be these trials that he has to do and like pass in order to become a spellcaster in his community. And that's really important because basically if you don't succeed in those, then you end up kind of becoming just a servant for your family or whoever. And he's having an issue where the closer he's getting to his birthday, the more the little bit of magic that he's been able to use is like slowly becoming less and less. And so he's freaking out because he does not know how he's gonna end up passing these trials, but he's very cunning and is good at doing whatever like trick or scheme or whatever he can in order to get through things, I guess. And it says, but when a daring stranger arrives in town, she challenges Kellen to take a different path. Farius Parfax is one of the mysterious Argosi, a traveler who lives by her wits and the 3 decks of cards she carries. She's difficult and unpredictable, but she may be Kellen's only hope. As I read this series, Farius kind of reminds me like in some ways of Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender, just very loving and guiding, but also could be frustrated because it seems like she just spits out a lot of like nonsense sometimes that isn't nonsense, but that's how it feels. And so I really like her character a lot. I think she's probably one of the strongest points of the series, at least so far. But the next series that I want to continue is the Fallen Kingdom series by Morgan Rhodes. This was an interesting journey for me because I had picked up the first book. I think I finished it, and I don't know what it was, but I was not feeling it at all. I did not want to continue. I didn't feel invested in the characters. So after that first book, I dropped the series. And then a while ago, I decided there was a few series that I had dropped that I had heard such solid things about that I felt like I needed to give them another shot. And of the, I think, 3 that I picked up again, Fallen Kingdoms is the only one that I've actually stuck with since then. And so I've read the first 3 books in that series, and I am having an amazing time. I definitely have grown to love these characters more and more, and so don't have the same issues that I had at first. Even rereading the first book, I felt closer to them. I must have just been in like a weird funk or something the first time I read it, and the maneuverings in it and just the character development and the way everything is just happening. It's just fascinating to watch how these characters' lives can change so drastically after short periods of times. Like one distinct event can like change something so drastically. It's been an adventure and I'm having a great time. But the description of the first book, I won't go into like all the different characters' descriptions like how it does, but it says, in the 3 kingdoms of Mythica, magic has long been forgotten, and while hard-won peace has reigned for centuries, a deadly unrest now simmers below the surface. As the rulers of each kingdom grapple for power, the lives of their subjects are brutally transformed, and 4 key players, royals and rebels alike, find their fates forever intertwined. Cleo, Jonas, Lucia, and Magnus are caught in a dizzying world of treacherous betrayals, shocking murders, secret alliances, and even unforeseen love. The only outcome that's certain is that kingdoms will fall. Who will emerge triumphant when all they know has collapsed? It's the eve of war. Choose your side. Yeah, it's just been a great time. But next up, we have the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I've read the first book in this series. I want to read more so bad, but I'm also just like pushing it off because the books are so long, and I guess I just let myself get intimidated. I am trying not to let that happen. That first book, I had such an amazing time with it, and there are multiple characters who I've come to really love, like even just the difference from the first little bit of the first book to the end. I felt my feelings for certain characters like grow. I definitely had some annoyances that I was dealing with at the beginning, but this is another series where, I guess in this case because the books are so long, but you just see so much change in the characters' lives and in them. So I love those kind of journeys like that. But next, I want to continue the War of Lost Hearts series by Carissa Broadbent. The first book in that series is The Daughter of No Worlds. After reading this first book, my initial thoughts was this was going to be one of the few romanticities that I might actually want to own, but for some reason I think I just got distracted and stuff, and I never picked up the second books, and so I really want to continue the series to see if it can like follow through, I guess. But it's about this girl named Tisana who was a slave, but she ends up escaping. And she goes to the Orders, who are like the most powerful magic wielders around. And she is going to them in hopes that they will help her rescue the other slaves, including like her best friend and stuff. And they agree on the condition that she join their ranks, and in order to do that must also fulfill an apprenticeship. And she ends up getting assigned to this guy named Maxentarius. And it says, the Order's intentions are cryptic, and Tisana must prove herself under the threat of looming war. But even more dangerous are her growing feelings for Maxentarius. The bloody past he wants to forget may be the key to her future, or the downfall of them both. I really liked Maxentarius as a love interest, and I thought that the plot of the story was really well done, and I don't remember there being like any major annoyances with the main character or the love interest. So I think honestly just not getting annoyed with the main characters was like the biggest selling point for me to like really fall in love with that first book, because a lot of time with romantasy I'll have fun with like the action and like the romance stuff, but when you break down like the characters' actual personalities, I don't really typically tend to like them all that much, so it makes it hard to stay invested in the series. So I'm hoping that my feelings that I had with that first book continue into the other two. I think it's a trilogy, because I hate that I love a good like emotional romance so much, and yet with the romantasy genre I seem to struggle with it so much. So I would love for this to be one that like I actually have on my shelves and to be like, yeah, this is something I love, you know, because I don't know, it's kind of like I'm left out. I don't know. But next and last in this category, we have the Locked Home series by Tamsin Muir. This is another one that I've only read the first book on. I had picked up the second one just barely and got intimidated by the second person POV, but I will persevere because I've heard that it's really well done. So it's not like an issue for me that it's there, it's just I'm inexperienced with it. But the quick breakdown of this series, or the first book at least, is lesbian necromancers in space, bodyguard, romance, and like trials that the main characters are going to be competing in as a team. The premise of this book, like the first book, felt just so fascinatingly unique to me, just all the different elements that the author managed to combine and make it work. I was just blown away by that first book. So I am excited, even if I am nervous for the second one. But the last category that we have to talk about is manga. I am really wanting to pick up and read in entirety certain series to see if they're actually ones that I want to own, or to make sure that my memory is serving me correctly, you know? So the first series that I want to read is Tokyo Revengers. This is one that I had read on my phone like a long time ago, and I got like 100 chapters in, I think. I read quite a bit of it, but I want to actually make it to the end, if it's even finished. I haven't actually looked that up, but I'm pretty sure it is, before deciding if I want to have copies of it, because I would hate to get to the end and hate that so much that it ruins the series for me, and then I've spent like money on having books like on my shelves, you know? So that's why I want to read that one. It says, watching the news, Takemichi Hanagaki learns that his girlfriend from way back in middle school, Hinata Tachibana, has died. The only girlfriend he ever had was just killed by a villainous group known as the Tokyo Manji Gang. He lives in a crappy apartment with thin walls, and his 6 years younger boss treats him like an idiot. Plus, he's a complete and total virgin. Anime priorities. At the height of his rock-bottom life, he suddenly time leaps 12 years back to his middle school days. To save Hinata and change the life he spent running away, hopeless part-timer Takemichi must aim for the top of the Kanto's most sinister delinquent gang. This series has a lot of time jumping, and it was done in a really fascinating way to me, so that was what appealed to me the most. And it's also very action-packed, and I felt like it was done just really well. So I want to continue, and this is a series I know I like the first 100 chapters, but I do need to reread them. So I want to start over and actually make it to where I'm caught up with the series, whether that's as much as they have now or actually complete, I'm not sure. But these next two are actually mangas of series where the animes were like the first animes I ever watched when I was like 11 years old. So I'm really excited for both of them. The first one is Fruits Basket. I feel like you've likely heard of this. It's a really well-known series, even outside of like hardcore anime manga people. It's about this girl named Toru who, after she is homeless for a little bit, she ends up going to stay with this Soma family, and two of the boys in this family she actually goes to school with, and it turns out that there is like this family curse, I guess, where when certain people who have this curse in the family, if they get hugged by members of the opposite sex, then they turn into like their zodiac animal. And it sounds like kind of a silly premise, but the whole series and like each character's story, and you get to know them, they're all so sad, honestly. This series really talks about like family trauma and mental health and feeling like you belong, and just it covers kind of like everything, I guess. I don't know if that's probably not true, but it's such a emotional story, and I feel like especially as a young kid it was great just as an eye-opener, like learning, I guess, about these things. And I watched the anime, so I'm curious to see how I feel about the manga. Anyways, the last series that I want to read is Skip Beat. This is one of the old school famous shoujo series. It might still be ongoing. I remember a while ago hearing that it was still ongoing and just being completely shocked because it has literally been going on since I was a kid. But it's about this girl who followed her childhood love out to the city and is living with him, and she went out there to support him in his music or entertainment career. And she is like working multiple jobs, if I remember correctly, and cooking for him all the time, doing all the cleaning in the house, and being like as supportive as she can. And she just like loves him so much. Well, she ends up overhearing that he basically just sees her as his childhood friend who tagged along and is keeping house for him and just does not give a crap about her at all. And it's like a switch goes off and you get to see like basically evil spirits, I guess, come off of her all the time just to represent like her anger at the situation that she's in and at him, you know. And she ends up deciding that the best way for revenge is to join the entertainment industry herself. And so the series is just her journey into that, and it's so much fun. I love the series so much. I have never read the manga, and I'm curious to see how they compare, but considering last I knew, I think it had like 50 volumes or something like that. I'm gonna look that up. Oh, I had a pretty good guess. It looks like there's 51 volumes so far. It's love too, so I'm really excited. All right, so those are the 25 books I want to read in 2025. This was so much fun, but I did have a couple questions I just wanted to ask you guys. And the first one is DNFs. Would you rather me talk about my DNFs in wrap-ups for like when I do a monthly wrap-up or whatever, or would you rather me separate those so they're not like making the videos too long and I could do like a quarterly just talking about all my DNFs for that quarter? That's something I've been contemplating. I can't make up my mind, so let me know what you think. And the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is I'm going to be doing a reading journal for the very first time ever, and I would love to make a video, but I was curious if you would rather see like an actual setup video and watch me struggle through figuring out where to place drawings and diagrams and whatever that I put in it, or would you rather I struggle on my own and just show you the final flip through. And I'll do whichever one, if you guys like comment or whatever, I'll do whichever one more people prefer. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Bye.